My name is Marcin Warpechowski, and I'm from Gdynia. And I'm a JavaScript programmer. I mostly work with web components. And perhaps some of you already know. I wonder who knows, who has heard about web components already and Polymer Frame. Who has tried web components? Yeah, much less people. And I was giving a presentation about web components on meet.js summit half year ago. And I focused on talking about the specification for web components, how do you build web components, and what are the parts of the specification. But it was not practical at all. And many people think that this is the thing of the future, and maybe when I want to make a web component, I will learn about it. But not everyone knows that they can actually use web components in their projects. And you don't have to make web components. You can just use the web components that are already there. So this presentation will be more practical, and I will show you a workflow that I use at the company where I work, and how I use a website called customelements.io, which is the directory of existing web components, and how I use Bower to install them locally, and then how do I make my code. So I don't have any slides, but I will make some live coding, so my fingers crossed, and I wish you fun. This screen is slightly bigger, so I think it will be visible better here, but it should be okay. So sorry, I will sit because I have some typing to do. So for those who don't know, web components is a way to create new HTML tags and use them in your code. And this is a new spec that is developed mostly by Google, and Mozilla is following, and Internet Explorer to some extent, Safari not at all at the moment. But it is getting better, and Google has created a framework called Polymer, which is a library built on top of web components, but is also a polyfill. So when you have a browser that doesn't support web components, you can still use web components if you have Polymer. So with Polymer framework, you can use web components in Internet Explorer, the recent version, also Safari, and of course Firefox and Chrome. So this slide here, yeah, it looks like a regular HTML slide, but actually it is being searched from my database server, because the thing that I didn't say is that I work actually for a database company. And we use HTML as a platform for creating web apps, and we see web components as a very crucial part of it. And here I will demonstrate how I make an HTML app that talks to my database using JSON. And I already have the database, and I already have a JSON interface to it. So on my server, whenever I refresh the page, a new JSON view model is created. And I will use a web component to talk to the server to download the JSON and to see what this JSON contains. So I can show you something on the screen. So I will make an app that shows music albums. And I have imported a database of music albums from discogs.com. It's a website where you can see like hundreds of thousands of music, and I just downloaded the funk music, which is 40,000 records, and I will just try to show some of it. So in my HTML file, I already have platform.js and Polymer, the two files that come from Polymer framework, and it means that my client here is web components enabled. And I also have Puppet.js, which is a web component that I made at this company where I work. And what it does, it downloads the JSON from the server and creates a three-way binding. So I have JSON on my server, I have JSON in my JavaScript, and I also have access to this JSON in my template right here. So this feature comes from Polymer framework. It means that I can use variables in my HTML. So here I'm binding to application object in my template. And actually you don't see it yet, because it is just a static text. So I want to show you the JSON here. And I will go to custom elements IO, which is a great website that shows you a library of custom elements that are created by anyone in the world. There's now, it's being loaded. It's 600 elements already. So you can pick them and you can build an app like from building blocks, just connecting them together. So for example, when I want to show something that is using JSON, I have some here. And actually I want to use this one here. It's also created by us, actually by Tomek, who is in this room. And it is showing JSON tree as HTML. So I will just, usually when you go from custom elements IO to some project, you see a GitHub README that shows how do you install this custom element and how do you put it to your HTML. Yeah, it's quite slow. So usually you install using Bower. So by clicking Bower, by copying Bower and pasting it to my terminal, Bower loads it from GitHub, and actually in web components there is you have dependency trees sometimes. So for example, this element is using different libraries. It is using JSON editor JS, and it is using Polymer, and Bower downloads all the other dependencies that are required by those components and puts them to your working directory. So using Bower, I don't have to worry about what libraries this component needs. I just then go to this installation instruction, and it says copy this to your head. So I do. Remember, I need to change this here, and this component looks like that. So I paste it here, and let's see if it works. So yeah, some network problems. Okay, yeah, it's sometimes slow. So I have this custom element here, and it doesn't show any JSON, because actually I need to pass a reference to it, so it doesn't know. It shows an empty JSON. It doesn't know which one I want. So the README of this custom element shows that you have some options, and one of them is JSON, where you pass a reference to a JSON object. So in my application, I can just I can just bind to the global object, which is referred using this just empty brackets, and JSON. So there it is. So this is my JSON object. My server sends to the client a JSON object that has a count property. It says the number of the records in my database. It says I have some music albums, 50 of them, and one focused album. And so these music albums, they have cover, they have a title, and so on. So first, let's try to display something from this JSON object. I will use Polymer data binding to display the count of the records from my database. So So I'm using this variable count from JSON, and it shows the number 40,000 from JSON. And Polymer also allows me to iterate over an array. So I can use it to iterate over albums and show the covers. So thank you. It's proof that I'm doing this live. Okay, ugly album titles. Because I have some CSS and it is affecting it, but let's wrap it here. So these are my album covers. And yeah, they're quite big. I'll make them smaller. Yeah, so this is it. And there is also a focused album, so for any of them I can display the more details about this album. So let's try that. And in my JSON I have a title for an album, and for example the year when it was created. Yeah, so the focused album is displayed here. And actually I need to display the details of any of the albums right here. So not just, it is displaying the title for the first one, but I want to change the focus. So in Polymer, there is a trick that lets you access a JSON or a JavaScript object and change its properties. So I will use it here because my server, as I said, I have this three-way data binding. So my server listens to the changes in JSON object and can react to it. So I will use this Polymer feature to focus an album. And yeah, that should do the trick. Yeah, so I'm using JavaScript very simple. I'm just calling, I'm changing null values over the objects right here in the albums array. And whenever I change focus to null, my server listens to it and says, aha, okay, so we want to focus this one. So then it replaces the JSON for the focused album. And this is how it works. So for a focused album, I can also display the cover, for example. So let's do the same. I want to show the cover, but I want it to be more funny, so I will use it as a background image. Let's see if it works. No. Yeah. Thank you. Someone is watching. Now? Yeah. So there is this big cover that is big JPEG and the small cover that is here, and the big JPEG. The path for this big JPEG is here in the focused album, but I hack it a little bit. So Polymer allows me to use these variables not only in my HTML, but even in my CSS. If I write inline CSS or if I write style tag. So what else I can do? I showed you how I can use custom elements IO to search for web components. And actually, I want to use it once again because I have video ID for any album that I can download from YouTube. And to do this, I need to have a way to display YouTube videos. And using YouTube embed wouldn't be very web component way. So I will just download a web component to show this YouTube video. So of course I can also use iframe from YouTube, but I want it to be more interesting for the presentation. So let's find Google YouTube. So Google actually creates a lot of web components, and it creates web components for all of them, all of their projects. So most prominent is Google Map, Google YouTube, but there is much more. And I will use Google YouTube. So I have already downloaded it from Bower, so it is in my working directory, and there is an instruction here how I use Google YouTube. It also is very, very simple. So I will just copy this from Google YouTube README. So here I need to show video URL. I want it to be big. Yeah, and to use this custom element, I need to import it from HTML file. So Google YouTube HTML, and this should actually show the video. Yeah, this is not a style sheet. This is an import. Yeah, that should do the trick. Wow, it does. It works. So let's see if I can play it. There is sound. So as you can see, it's super easy to build an app with web components, especially when you know what you are doing and you practice it twice at home. But still, it's super fast. And whenever you have an idea that I want to use something interactive in my app, you just can go to custom elements.io, and there is a big chance that you will find something. So, for example, I can if I want a graph, I will find a lot of data visualization libraries, and they all come with instructions how do you use them. So web components, it's not only about boring stuff like displaying a JSON tree or about showing YouTube video, but actually there's also quite a lot of fantastic, funny elements that do crazy stuff with your page. So one that I like a lot is made actually by the creator of this website, by Zeno Roca, and it is voice elements. So this custom element enables me to add voice recognition to my page. So, but first I want to show you one more thing here. I'm displaying 50 elements from my database, but I want actually to be able to search in the database. So I also have a query parameter in my JSON that lets me allows me to ask database for something. Yeah, and actually it works. So when I type to this field, this property in JSON is updated, and when server sees this change in query property, it replaces the search result. So now I'm only seeing Michaels, different Michaels, Michael Jackson mostly. So this field updates when I type to it, but actually I would like to be able to speak to it. So I will use this voice element, and let's see how it works. So actually I need, I think I will copy from a file that I have just to speed up things, but it's not much to do actually. So I will copy voice recognition import, and I need to add this voice recognition HTML tag, and also I need a button to start the recording. So I just added 2 lines actually. Voice recognition, and it binds to this query as well. in my template, and also a button that actually turns voice recognition on by calling start method. So if it works, we should see a start button here. Yeah, and it does. So I'll try to do one more search on YouTube, but this time using this custom element. And yeah, if it works, then I think it's a kind of magic. Yeah, almost. But it does. So yeah. Now you need to hear it. So I think this is it. This is the web components. It's a big groundbreaking thing, and sometimes it's a little bit magical about how much you can achieve in very short time with your projects. So, yeah, and if you have any questions. Yeah, please ask, because this is the end of the presentation and as much as I can do in 20 minutes. But I'm happy to answer all the questions that you have.
My question is about the imports of HTML files that you have on top of your structure. I wonder, can it be somehow integrated with the build system so there are not many additional requests for these HTML templates?
Yeah, so each web component is at least one HTML5 import, but sometimes it is more because, for example, this JSON editor requires Polymer, and this voice elements, I think it requires even more. So sometimes you end up with like 20 HTML import requests before your page loads. And the browser makes a very good job at caching HTML imports, so they are usually loaded only once, but still you need to talk to cache 20 times until you receive the file. So Polymer guys have implemented a script called Vulcanized, I think. And what it does, you add it to your build process, and it creates one big HTML import that contains all the HTML imports. Because actually you can have more than one web component in one HTML import, but usually they are distributed separately. So if you, in your build process, join them together into one HTML, it can be in one HTML. And actually, you don't even have to use HTML imports, because you can copy the content of HTML import into your main HTML file, and it will also work. So you will just have a huge file, but only a single request. So it is. I didn't see who asked, but you don't need the request. It is just very convenient for the development, but you can later skip it. I know you have questions. Yeah?
Do you think that web components and Polymer are mature enough to use it in the commercial projects?
I'm using it at my job because we are not planning to make anything usable right now. And I can say that I have been playing with it for about a year now, and it is functional and it works in any browser. But sometimes there goes an update for the browser or update for the library, and it stops working. So if you can take a risk of requiring big maintenance to your project, and sometimes things can change, with browser update, then you can use it right now, I think. When you ask Polymer guys, they say they don't give any guarantee, and they say this is alpha stage. But actually, there is the W3C spec is, I think it's still a working draft, but it's implemented 100% in Google Chrome. So it works natively in Google Chrome. And in every other browser, it works with the polyfill. So I would say only if this is a commercial project, but like play thing, because there are also projects like that, you can use it. But for production, I think next year will be the year where you can use it. Some questions more? So yeah, I just want to add that it plays well with any other framework. So this is just an addition to HTML. But if you are using Angular or if you are using Ember or anything else, you can still just use one web component, like GitHub does. When you go to GitHub, I think all of you use GitHub, there is this time formatter that shows you 5 months since last upgrade. This is a web component. So every one of us is actually seeing web components on production websites, but they are just small parts. And sometimes you can see examples of Polymer where the whole application is built with web components, like mine. When I remove web components, it doesn't work at all, because it is all on web components. But you can also use web components for progressive enhancement like GitHub does. So if no more questions, I will be available in the hall. Is there one?
Hi. Can you lazy load and initialize the amount of light? I mean the components.
Yeah, you can, because you can actually, so web components are loaded using HTML import, and you can append this HTML, this link import to your document at any time. So you can, but then you need a script, yeah? So you can have a JavaScript that loads an import only when it's required, and then it's a little bit tricky, and because for most of the part you can just use HTML. You don't need to touch any line of JavaScript to build an app with web components. But to do this thing, you actually need some code, and then yes. Or other web component. Or a web component that wraps, because we are trying to invent these things, and Tomek there is doing a great job at it. So we actually created a web component that allows you to insert HTML to a web page, and this HTML can import other components. So it's kind of inception. But Polymer guys don't advertise this way, so we are doing it quite against Polymer guys. But we think you can just, request dynamically HTML containing web components from the server, and this works as well. Yeah.
I have a question. Are there any problems with performance using web components?
I wouldn't recommend making games with web components, but for a business app, you usually don't care about performance as much as you care about the stability, the maintainability of the app. So if there is not much things going on the screen, you don't notice. It's like with Angular.js. It's not very performant. React is much more performant, but Angular is just easy to work with. And web components is like very lightweight Angular, so it's even easier to work with, and the performance is, it will be better because it will be native.
Okay, one more question. Have you ever tried to use it on mobile devices?
Yeah, but I don't test it much, but I know that Chrome mobile supports it as much as Chrome on the desktop. And the problem is with Safari, because Safari doesn't support it at all, but with the shim, it can work on mobile Safari.
Shim,
Yeah.
okay.
So it is quite, first-class citizen in HTML. It can be used on mobile. Thank you. Yeah, that's the end of the time, so you can find me there also. Thank you.